We want to talk about, Gerry, how you mentioned that Tesla believed that this technology was trying to put together and beam to the world was consciousness enhancing. How was that so? Why did Tesla think that? We'll get to that. But and what was Tesla's vision for the future? He envisioned a utopian form of energy. What was his vision? What was he trying to accomplish on a social agenda? Let's talk about that. But first, this is something that you said no one ever talks about with Tesla. Few people have realized this, but Tesla saw some very unusual byproducts, after effects, in his laboratory when he turned this kind of radiant energy on. What were they?
Well, one thing was in the early days when he operated the radiant energy transmitters in his laboratory in New York, he noticed that once he turned these transmitters off, the power didn't stop, and that was the magnifying transmitter principle in action. In other words, he could light up wireless lamps to full candle power and operate motors long after the transmitter had been deactivated. And he also noticed that his mind and his body were strangely cleared of any kind of negativity or any kind of resistance, and would give himself therapeutic exposures to this kind of radiant energy. He and his technicians would sit in front of these globes for maybe a half an hour at a time, sometimes an hour or more. In his case, he'd fall asleep in front of these things. And he found that they had germicidal properties. In other words, they could, if you were coming down with something, if you were feeling ill, suddenly you'd feel better again after the exposure. But the most important part of his discovery in this regard was the enhancing or elevation of consciousness. And one one imagines that he would expose his technicians, who sometimes were bumbling idiots, to these rays just to elevate their awareness. So he was very cognizant of the fact that he had found the means to achieve that goal which he originally set out to find, and that was the connection point between metaphor, vision, metaphysical world reality, and physical world reality. So now, when he operated his magnifying transmitter in Colorado, you have to understand that this is tremendous energy. I mean, this is a huge flow of etheric energy. And what Tesla describes in his diary is really fantastic, because in a very matter-of-fact way, he says a very extraordinary number of things. Number one, he describes the fact that after running the transmitter, the air all around the station assumes a crystal clarity of a rare kind. For example, he describes seeing persons with great detail traveling on trains, passengers on trains 10 miles away, where you could literally see these people's faces.
So he was actually looking out the window. A train was 10 miles in the distance.
Yeah.
And somehow he was able to get a picture of, did he check it out?
He could literally see the train, see the spokes on the wheels, and see the faces of the passengers 10 miles away. Whereas, on the other hand, a person at the foot of the hill could not be seen. They looked awfully small.
So perception was altered somehow.
So yes, there's like an optical distortion going on as a result of the ether flow, which meant to Tesla that the ancient science was absolutely right on. In other words, the natural sites where astronomers and scientists of the sort, the ancient scientists were resorting to, were probably natural sites where ether was moving. And this is why they were able to project their consciousness far away, get remote viewing.
So the ancients might have happened on to geographical areas or areas that were enhanced by megalithic stones or temples or something like this, you're suggesting. And then this would have been a natural property.
Yes.
You step into this and these abilities start to happen, and then they would have learned this and started focusing them and say, where do I want to see? Okay.
Like the Persians, probably. Now, Tesla was a great aficionado of Persian mythology and Arabian folktales. And so his vision of the future was flying machines through the skies, drawing power from power transmitters, nations that didn't have to worry about foreign invaders because they were all defended by power beams, pollution-free vehicles, safe ocean travel, broadcast therapy for public health, where you could literally destroy germs from miles away just by a broadcast, and do it selectively. A thing which Dr. Raymond Reif, later reproduced with great success in the 30s.
And we'll have to talk about that at a later date.
Oh, yes. And so Tesla also, of course, now the hidden agenda was something which he brings forward in an essay, one of his greatest essays, entitled The Problem of Increasing Human Energy, which most people totally misunderstand because they don't understand the phrase human energy.
This was the code word for his radiant energy?
Well, human energy was a code word for the human aura, or consciousness.
Okay.
And it was used by Dr. Albert Abrams at the turn of the century, who also found that it was possible to change mental states with electrical stimulations. So this was corroborated by many people, and Tesla basically describes the progression of helping humanity. For example, he said humanity needs food, but food won't elevate consciousness. Humanity needs fuel, but fuel won't elevate human consciousness. And humanity needs education and government, but none of those will really elevate consciousness on a mass scale. And he says the need of humanity, the fundamental need as we move into the future, is an elevated consciousness, an awareness of the world as it is, a metaphysical awareness.
And perhaps this could be assisted by a particular device.
Absolutely. And so this is the principal reason why he built Wardenclyffe in Long Island. And he had planned, he called it his communication system, but basically what he was going to communicate to the world was a
enhanced consciousness.
Yes, an elevated consciousness as the primary function. Then, of course, he had all the other applications: telephone exchange, wireless telephone exchange, and
that would be a carrier wave for all these other practical benefits.
Exactly.
So he believed that this was going to elevate consciousness because of his own experience sitting in his laboratory, in this fountain of ether.
Right.
He noticed that it had a germicidal effect. His body felt better. His mind felt more clear, not only with him, but his assistants, and he also had enhanced perceptive abilities.
Right, vitalizing. He felt, he described it as a nerve tonic. One would imagine it was almost like taking B12 shots. Vitalizing effect. It's an interesting thing, too. Tesla lived well on into his 80s. It just seemed that the legal process, the legal machinery was after Tesla to destroy Wardenclyffe just a few weeks before he had it running.
What was the story? What was the demise of Wardenclyffe? And this was the big tower that was going to beam to the world this radiant consciousness-enhancing energy. Well, the story goes that Tesla said to Morgan, well, we're going to give energy to the world and not charge for it. And Morgan said, oh, no, we've got a meter for it, and put a stop to it. That's the general story that goes out.
That's part of it. I think also it was realized that he was planning to do other things with this energy. And,
with a little consciousness raising. So wrong.
Yeah. I think people who
You can tell me the doctors are all threatened. We need sick people, or we're out of business.
Right. And financiers need the ignorance of humanity so that they can continually dupe them.
If people think too clearly, they're less easy to fool.
Right.